Next News. Breaking news.
Tonight, the Ebola story just exploded past the usual case counts and death toll graphics because now it's not only about a virus in Central Africa. It's about whether the public can trust the same institutions that got so much wrong during COVID, funded dangerous gain-of-function work, and still expect blind obedience. An NIH-linked Ebola expert is under FBI scrutiny after allegedly bringing undeclared pathogen samples through a U.S. airport. Yes, he's been arrested, and at the same time, Washington is pouring massive resources into containment, and the World Health Organization facing open resistance on the ground. So here's the question Americans are asking tonight. Is this only an outbreak story, or is it a biosafety and trust story too? See, that's the heart of the story, and it matters because post-COVID America does not hear words like outbreak, vaccine, World Health Organization, PCR testing, and emergency response the way it did 6 years ago. People now immediately ask, who funded what? Who knew when? Who benefits? And are we being told the whole truth? See, those questions didn't come out of nowhere. They came from years of censorship, shifting narratives, and elite arrogance from the former Biden administration's public health machine and its media allies. Now, President Trump's administration is trying to contain a real overseas threat while also navigating a public that no longer gives global health bureaucrats the benefit of the doubt. That changes everything. It changes how every CDC move is received, how every funding announcement is interpreted, and how every new vaccine headline lands. When you add in reports about gain-of-function labs, Congo-linked pathogen handling, and fresh federal money flowing into Ebola response programs, this stops being a narrow medical update and becomes a national trust test, with American security, transparency, and credibility all on the line. And in moments like this, when uncertainty is everywhere and institutions keep asking for more trust than they've earned, smart Americans start thinking seriously about real-world protection. And that's why I want to tell you about Noble Gold Investments. If you could go back in time and buy oil before the world relied on it, would you? Of course you would. Anyone would. So why aren't you buying silver right now? The people who saw oil early didn't just make money, they got ahead of one of the biggest economic shifts in history, and today a similar opportunity is unfolding with silver. Silver is more than a precious metal. It's used in solar panels, electric vehicles, defense systems, AI infrastructure, and the manufacturing base that powers modern life. So go to nextnewsgold.com right now, and you could receive a 1/10 ounce gold coin with a qualifying investment. That's nextnewsgold.com before the crowd catches on. Now back to the story, because what happened next is exactly why Americans are demanding answers instead of slogans. Now here's the twist that changed the entire environment. Even if the outbreak itself is real and serious, the public is no longer separating response from origin, and origin from research. That wall is gone. When an NIH virologist tied to Congo Ebola fieldwork gets investigated and arrested over undeclared biological samples, and Tulsi Gabbard confirms U.S.-funded gain-of-function programs around the world have been linked to major health crises, people connect the dots instantly. Then add vaccine money, border screening, quarantine talk, and World Health Organization messaging, and the question becomes unavoidable. Can the managers of the response actually be trusted? Now, this post caught my attention. The Ebola scam, it's another pandemic.
To all of you, the hentai virus is now out of the news cycle. They've now replaced it with the deadly Ebola outbreak in the Congo. But thankfully, the people are not having it.
Currently, I am in the Democratic Republic of the Congo for a couple months, okay? And there's no Ebola here. Everyone is living the best life. No one is panicking.
Mining gold is one of the top businesses over there, and it releases high levels of arsenic, which leads to arsenic poisoning, and arsenic poisoning and Ebola have the same symptoms. And again, they're using the same fraudulent PCR test to see if you have it. Even Tedros from the WHO came in for a photo op. This guy claims it's so deadly, but he walks around with no protective gear. Same with CNN. And guess what? Moderna just landed a $50 million funding to create an Ebola mRNA vaccine. And the funding came from CEPI, which is bankrolled by the Gates Foundation. You can't make this up. So the question becomes, why the Congo? This country sits on top of almost $500 billion worth of gold. And as war expands, gold takes value. Congo also leads the world in lithium, copper, and cobalt. Exactly what you need to build these electric cars and data centers. There's no coincidences here. You poison the people or use something that's already there. You build a narrative to control the area and you drain the resources. So just like every other pandemic, this story needs to stay where it belongs.
So you heard the claim. Ebola push is being used to sell shots and control a resource-rich region. Now look at the money trail. Officials are openly talking about hundreds of millions for screening, testing, tracing, and containment. United States ramping up Ebola response as outbreak continues to grow. The U.S. says it's mobilizing medical, humanitarian, and operational resources to help contain the Ebola outbreak in Central Africa. According to officials, hundreds of millions of dollars have been committed towards border screening, testing, contact tracing, protective equipment, and support for affected countries.
I think importantly here is the broader response, and that's only one part of this response, including $13.5 million working with Kenya on their Ebola response, $162 million going to DRC and other countries in the affected area to address Ebola, including PPE, including contact tracing, including the ability to test and diagnose, border screening. And that is on top of $350 million that's been mobilized through OCHA, a pooled fund that allows us to address high priority needs. The United States is taking this incredibly seriously. The highest priority here is stopping the spread, keeping it from coming to our shores.
Keeping it out of the United States.
So the Feds say it's all about stopping Ebola before it reaches America, but Tulsi Gabbard takes the story somewhere darker, confirming U.S.-funded biolabs overseas were tied to dangerous gain-of-function research. This is when Gabbard confirmed the U.S. government is funding gain-of-function biolabs around the world, many of which are specifically linked to outbreaks around the world. This is what Tulsi admitted.
The thing that we are working with Jay Bhattacharya, the new NIH director, on with, as well as Secretary Kennedy, is looking at the gain-of-function research that, in the case of the Wuhan lab, as well as many of these other biolabs around the world, was actually U.S. funded and leads to this dangerous kind of research that, in many examples, has resulted in either a pandemic or some other major health crisis.
Well, let me ask you specifically, because we already know that EcoHealth Alliance was partnering with this Wuhan lab to do gain-of-function research.
That's right.
We just have never been able to have somebody say, it was that exact experiment that led to this COVID bug. But have we gotten there? What's the new thing that you're digging in on?
We are working on that with Jay Bhattacharya and look forward to being able to share that, hopefully very soon.
Okay.
That specific
link.
Correct, between the gain-of-function research and what we saw with COVID-19.
I mean, that.
So, continuing here, Tulsi putting the U.S.-backed biolabs and outbreak-linked research around the table. Next story gets more concrete. An NIH-linked Ebola expert is accused of bringing undeclared biological samples through a U.S. airport after working in the Congo. We've been tracking this.
Maybe a possibility he could have had Ebola samples with him. What's going on with this story, Nicholas?
Yeah, this is another shocking story. So an NIH virologist, an Ebola expert, he literally goes in the Congo often. He has field sites in the Congo to catch Ebola from wild animals. And so he was caught at a U.S. airport earlier this year with undeclared biological samples, what are called select agents that appear to be, we know for sure, monkeypox, but as well, there could be other pathogens. There could be Ebola because we know he works with Ebola. He was caught at the airport. Now he's under administrative leave. The FBI is reportedly investigating him. And this man, Vincent Munster, was linked or actually was actively involved in gain-of-function activities with SARS-CoV-2, with Fauci and colleagues. And so you can't even make this up.
Of course, we do now know that he was, in fact, arrested. As the airport bus raises the question every American should be asking, how deep does the NIH connection go? The next clip goes back to the post-Ebola years when gain of function was supposedly paused and Fauci's network was accused of shifting that work towards Wuhan. After Ebola, gain of function research was paused, so Fauci partnered with the Wuhan to conduct gain of function research there.
After the Ebola outbreak in 2014, there was a ban on gain-of-function research. But many people think that that ban was violated and that they did even more gain-of-function research at Wuhan. David Asher was at the State Department during the pandemic. When he began investigating the origin, he found all these crazy connections between the NIH and the Wuhan lab.
In 2015, the Wuhan Institute of Virology has launched a global recruitment plan of principal investigators under the Outstanding Foreign Talents Program, quote unquote, of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And the NIH is actually helping match scientists to the Chinese program to recruit our most sensitive biologists.
This was going to be China's first BSL-4 laboratory, which is the highest level of security.
Those are the ones where everybody has the full suit and the respirator.
The Chinese had partnered with the French to build this lab and then kicked them out the day it was finished.
Convenient, right? So the trail from Ebola-era research freeze to Wuhan links now widen the frame because the next lays out the playbook. Tom Elliott points out this is the WHO, WEF, UN strategy. Make a vaccine. Have a pandemic simulation, get the media on board, pay off the politicians, use fear propaganda, utilize gain of function, say there's an outbreak. Pharmaceutical liars step up and tell everyone they'll die. So the alleged playbook is one thing, but the next report shows the real-world backlash with protests in Kenya turning deadly over plans tied to an Ebola facility for Americans. This is CBS News.
After this outrage in Kenya, in which 2 people were killed protesting a Trump administration plan to set up an Ebola facility only for Americans at a military airbase, Secretary of State Marco Rubio now says that there has been a misunderstanding. And that's about whether Americans would only be observed for symptoms if they've been potentially exposed in the region, or if positive, whether they would be quarantined and then treated for the longer term.
We're not actually asking Kenya to set up treatment for Americans. I think the one that's been very controversial is a misunderstanding. There is a facility that the Kenyans are allowing us to open. If there are any Americans that are exposed, potentially exposed, they will be transferred to this facility for observation.
And he said that they would now be removed from Kenya, now to either Europe or the United States, to be treated. Notably, he did not say the facility was entirely off the table, and Flight Radar has been tracking U.S. military flights flying towards an airbase about 125 miles north of Nairobi. That airbase is called Laikipia. This was before a Kenya High Court judge blocked the facility, at least temporarily, but also after that judge blocked the facility. After those protests broke out on June 1st, Kenya's Prime Minister William Ruto said that it would be good for the country's own Ebola preparedness, and said that the U.S. and Kenya have had a friendship for the past 30 to 40 years. But many Kenyans feel that this is the Trump administration outsourcing American health risks to their own home country. And a high-level medical contact of mine in Nairobi told me that the expectation is that this U.S. facility will go ahead, regardless of what any high court says.
So that's CBS News. Kenyan protesters are calling this what it looks like to them, dumping American problems somewhere else. The next clip shows the chaos spreading inside the region, too, with Ebola burial teams in Congo being attacked on the ground. Congo Ebola responders now being attacked while trying to bury the dead. 2 burial teams were assaulted on Monday. One in South Kivu was forced to abandon a coffin mid-burial. Another in Ituri, where 4 workers were injured at a cemetery. There have been 363 confirmed cases and 62 deaths.
The World Health Organization is stepping up its response to the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, bringing much-needed supplies to the front lines of the health emergency this week. It comes amid multiple attacks by residents on Ebola response teams. The country's health ministry said residents attacked an Ebola burial team in the South Kivu province this week. forcing respondents to abandon a coffin in the town of Katana and raising fears of further transmission. The assault targeted specialized responders trained to handle highly infectious bodies under strict protocols to prevent contagion. Officials said the body was subsequently handled by members of the community, a high-risk practice that can fuel new chains of infection. They did not specify what triggered the attack. The incident underscores the mistrust and resistance that continues to hamper response efforts. Congo has recorded over 360 confirmed Ebola cases and at least 62 deaths since the latest outbreak was declared on May 15th, according to Health Ministry data. More than a dozen cases have also been reported in neighboring Uganda. In Kenya, President William Ruto defended his government's decision to allow the United States to set up an Ebola quarantine facility at an Air Force base.
The debate is, are we doing the right thing? Are we not? And I can tell you without fear of any contradiction, and I can look at everybody in the eye, Kenyan, including yourself, and tell you we are doing the right thing.
At least 2 people were killed earlier this week in protests in the central Kenyan town of Nanyuki, where the facility is being built. The 50-bed unit is being constructed for Americans who might be exposed to the virus. Flight data and officials say the U.S. government is continuing to build the Ebola quarantine facility despite the protests and Kenyan court orders blocking the construction.
So you saw the responders under attack, public anger boiling over. Next comes the key reason the World Health Organization keeps running into a wall. Many locals in Congo flat out do not even believe the Ebola story that they're being sold. Jamie Andrews says the World Health Organization having a hard time convincing locals in the Democratic Republic of Congo that Ebola exists.
Community mistrust is a serious barrier. Some community leaders told me that they believe Ebola is not real. Building trust with the communities is therefore critical to bringing the outbreak under control. There is active armed conflict in that province. Many armed groups operate in that province. And the instability, the insecurity, I think impacts the detection and the response as well.
We have to start to think about talking with the indigenous people. One of the delicacies is the wild animals, the fruit beds. So how can we start the process of discussing with them how to handle these things, how to handle the animals and the beds?
So the mistrust is crippling the response on the ground. Meanwhile, the U.S. government is projecting confidence. Next clip shows the official message from Washington about containing Ebola and protecting Americans. The Department of War Rapid Response Team says the Department of War is proud to stand with our joint interagency partners to ensure that the spread of Ebola is contained and Americans at risk have access to treatment. So that's the bureaucracy's line. Coordinated agencies control response mission underway. Next, the White House adds its own stamp, pushing Jay Bhattacharya's defense of CDC measures as targeted and justified. The White House posting, unlike the COVID response, the CDC's measures are scientifically justified and tailored to containment. So the administration is now insisting this response is nothing like the COVID disaster, but Laura Loomer is not buying it. She's about to point to State Department funding, travel concerns, and her warning that Ebola is already here. She says, I've been warning about Ebola lockdown in the U.S. since 2021, and she is quote tweeting her tweet from 2023. She says, I hope you're all ready for it soon to be announced that Ebola is in the United States. It will likely be announced between now and the week or two after the upcoming World Cup in the U.S., which is in 14 days, June 11th, 2026. How many Africans will be traveling to the U.S. for the World Cup? Too many. Today, the U.S. State Department quietly announced they're allocating another $80 million towards the Ebola response. With this new $80 million commitment, the State Department has mobilized more than $112 million in bilateral foreign assistance for the Ebola response in less than 2 weeks. And there's a reason, she says. It's coming to America, and they'll need at least to show that they tried to stop it. But the thing is, Ebola is already here. as I've been reporting for the last 2.5 weeks, you'll see bookmark this tweet. So, Laura Loomer says it's already here. So what this really means is simple. The Trump administration is right to protect Americans, secure borders, and act early, but the old public health priesthood no longer gets automatic credibility. Jay Bhattacharya is exactly right to draw a line between scientifically justified containment and the failed COVID-era panic model. That distinction matters because Americans support real protection. What they reject is secrecy, profiteering, manipulated science, and globalist institutions lecturing them after years of being wrong. The Congo outbreak may be one story, but the deeper story is that every outbreak now passes through a trust filter shaped by gain-of-function scandals, pathogen security failures, and broken institutions. If federal agencies want cooperation, they need transparency. If international bodies want compliance, they need honesty. And if there are biosafety failures anywhere in this chain, they must be exposed completely. So keep your eyes on the timeline. The funding, the research links, and the people insisting that you stop asking questions. That's always where the real story lives. President Trump's team has a duty to protect the homeland from any Ebola spread, and Americans absolutely want that done. But protecting the homeland also means cleaning house, demanding accountability, and never letting the same broken expert class hide behind fear again. If the outbreak is serious, tell us the truth. If containment is necessary, show us the evidence. If past research decisions help create this climate of distrust, own it. That's how confidence is rebuilt. Not with propaganda, not with censorship, with facts. So I want to hear from you. Do you trust the public health establishment to level with the American people on Ebola, yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments and share this report with someone who still remembers the COVID lies. And if you're new here, subscribe to Next News. Turn on your alerts because we are going to keep following every angle of this story. I want to make sure you're also getting the news when the censorship machine drops the hammer. That's why we set up the secret number that I keep showing you on the screen here. All you have to do is text raw feed to 844-840-4963. There are thousands and thousands of patriots who are now getting the direct messages from me every night when YouTube says, well, you know, maybe you don't deserve that notification. We're just cutting out the middleman completely. So make sure you text the words raw feed to that number on your screen. And make sure you're also celebrating this year. It is our 250th year as a beautiful republic. Check out the merch shelf below and find something to celebrate with us.
The system controls information. Information control is power. They don't want you to see this. The truth only survives together. They don't want this shared. Share this now.